And welcome into another episode of Diving for Penalties here on the CBS 42 podcast. My name is Nick Goulas. As always, you can follow along weekly here to listen to all of our podcasts, or you can also follow along on Twitter at Nick_Goulas. And this week, we're going with one of my personal favorite teams, the Portland Timbers, and their drab existence so far this season. And with us today from the SB Nation blog, Stumptown Footy, which covers all things Timbers and Portland Thorns, is Will Conwell. Will, how you doing today?
I am doing A-okay.
That's as best as any of us can really ask for. So good to hear. So let's just get down to it. First question, just be blunt. Why do the Timbers suck right now?
Well, if you ask 10 different people that question, you're going to get 10 different answers right now. The thing about the Timbers is they haven't been winning games, but they haven't been that far off from winning games either. One game, the defense will just have a boneheaded error. Another game, the shots just won't quite be able to get around the opposing keeper. It's been just a ton of little things that have ended up with one big winless streak.
And that winless streak currently has them at the bottom of not only the Western Conference, but the entire MLS table, just because Chicago's ineptitude is only slightly better than Portland's as the other winless team. They've been able to draw one more game. And, of course, an existence with the Timbers at the bottom and Seattle at the top of the table is just putrid. So we'll start with the defense. As you mentioned, it does the lack of continuity on that back line have the most to do with this, or is it the actual play of the players that are actually in the game at the time?
Well, early on, especially with the involvement of Paparazzo, one of the new guys this year, I think you could definitely say that some of the errors were due to the new guys being brought in, or the new guy being brought in. But as you go along, really, the goals have been just individual mistakes time and again. And you've got to think that, you can't blame it on changes in the back line anymore. It's been relatively consistent, despite little tweaks here and there. So, yeah, you just got to put it on the play of the individual guys right now, which is a shame because, last year they were the second best defense in the league. And we're still going with the same guys that were in there last year.
And when you watch them play, like I've gone back and I missed the Houston match live, but I watched Salt Lake. I watched the condensed match on Houston. The ball watching on the back line seems to be the biggest issue at the moment. And exactly, is that a midfield problem? Is that just a lack of communication? I mean, it looks like it's really all of the above on that back line right now for what's causing them to just sit still while their attackers from the other team just coming right at them.
Yeah, they all of the above is a pretty good option for what's going on with these guys. But when you look at it, 9 times out of 10 they're right there. But it's that one time when they're giving up that one dumb goal, especially in the last couple games against Salt Lake, against Houston. There's a whole series of things going wrong that's just leading up to really disappointing goals. The Salt Lake goal is a well-taken strike by Nick Grapavoy. They've all been well put together goals by the Timbers' opponents, but you can look at so many different breakdowns for each goal that the Timbers have given up. And if one thing goes right there, maybe the Timbers have their first shutout of the season. And maybe they have a point in Salt Lake. Maybe they have a win in Houston. But as it stands, those little breakdowns are happening all over the field.
And that lack of a shutout, that's probably what has been the most shocking. And you can't really put all the blame on Donovan Ricketts for this, but do you believe that he is having more of a 2012 year than a 2013 year right now?
No, I wouldn't say so. I think he's he's not having the same year he had in 2013 so far. But he has shown that he's still capable of making some big saves, especially early on when the defense was struggling the most. He made a few fantastic ones. He also made that one particularly boneheaded play where he got sent off and missed a couple games. But Ricketts, he's still been there for a few big saves each game. Now, have there been things that maybe he would have saved last year, in particular the Salt Lake goal? Yeah, but 2012 was its own special brand of awful in terms of the goalkeeping that we saw. So I don't want to put that on him just yet.
Yeah, I would agree completely with that. 2012 is just, we're done talking about 2012 right now. We'll just put it that way. And I do agree that the Grabovoi strike, and watching that game, there were harder hit balls than that one that went in. That one looked like it just found the one hole at the right time. And I think that's what might be most frustrating about this team right now, is that they seem to be there all the time, and then when that one chance comes along, the other team capitalizes on it, and it seems like that's the biggest difference right now.
Yeah, definitely.
And so now let's move up the field a little bit more, because it's not all on the defense, because the goals just aren't really flowing. The goal differential isn't bad. I mean, I think it's just -1 at the moment on the season. Yeah, -1. And so we're looking now forward, but Gaston Fernandez is the leading goal scorer for this team, which is kind of what you would want, but the production from the guys that have been here is not what it was. What's going wrong up front?
Well, so Caleb Porter was actually talking about this at practice yesterday, and what he was saying, and I agree with him, is that a large part of the reason that guys like Darlington Nagbe and Diego Valeri have not been able to produce so far at the same level they did last year is that sort of across the board the Timbers have been less dangerous as a team. So other teams are able to sort of queue up on those two guys more than they did last year, without sort of the fear of being hurt from whoever's playing over on the left wing, or whoever is playing up top, or a late run out of the midfield from Will Johnson. So without sort of the fear of those other positions, teams are able to shut down the two guys who really drive the Timbers' attack, and that's it's almost a chicken or the egg scenario where does somebody else need to start being dangerous for those guys to get free, or do those guys need to get free for somebody else to start being dangerous? Either way, it's not happening.
And I saw early on there were people that were saying that the departure of Ryan Johnson is making all the difference as far as that is concerned right now. Do you believe that Diego Valeri, Darlington Nagbe, Will Johnson are struggling because Ryan Johnson is no longer a part of this team, or they may not have adjusted to life without him yet?
I think that the dimension that Ryan Johnson brought, especially early in the season last year, he was just banging in goals off some good chances that he really engineered for himself. And I think that not having a striker who's sort of on form on a hot streak doing that makes it more difficult for those guys to someone out, but also to make space for themselves. With guys like Fernandez, who, I mean, Ryan Johnson scored a fair number of like poacher, pure goal scorer type goals, but Fernandez, although he is opportunistic, and that's how he's scored his goals so far, he's definitely more of a player who's going to drop back and look to get involved in the play rather than staying up, pushing the front line. Or Rudy, who's gotten his fair number of starts as well this season already, is more of a player who's going to push the front line like Ryan Johnson, but he just doesn't have the same physicality and the same nose for goal, unfortunately.
Agreed. And now you look forward, and I'm looking down the road now because there's 3 home games in a row coming up. To consider this homestand a turnaround for the Timbers, how many points do they need? Not should they get, but need from this homestand?
Well, I mean, if they want to make it into the playoffs, realistically, I mean, they need to go undefeated at home, and they need to win the majority of their games at home. Having already dropped this many points in the season, it's going to be, they've got some ground to make up, especially if the road results are not particularly great, which, they haven't been. So, I mean, for me, I would say that 7 points would be sort of the minimum positive outcome. But, that's going to be difficult with the teams that are coming to town. Even DC, who, I mean, they were historically awful last year. They're a team that they've been playing pretty well, even if they haven't gotten a result on the road yet. So the Timbers, if they can snap out of whatever this funk is, they need to take a bunch of points. But if they don't, it's going to make the season just that much longer.
Yeah, and you look at these teams that are coming in, like you mentioned, DC. After that comes LA and then Columbus. It's odd to hear that the worst team out of those 3 coming to Providence Park is the Galaxy, if you look at the current table, which just kind of speaks to the difficulty of the upcoming games. And it's just, where does the team go from here if everything just goes bad? I mean, do they just, you don't want to say you mail in a season, especially in MLS, where everybody is just so close and so tight, and anything can just turn on a single match. But if the Timbers come through here with 1 victory, come away with only 3 or 4 points, is the question is the answer to just keep trudging along?
Well, so far, yes. if this little homestand goes poorly, though, they've got to seriously look at the core group of guys they've got. I mean, the Timbers are a team that they've got a lot of young players, a lot of players sort of in which would be the prime of their career. Despite bringing in a couple 30-year-olds over the offseason, but the core of the team is all in that age where they could be playing together for several years. They've built this team to play together for the foreseeable future. But, if they can't pull it together this season, then that sort of throws that whole long-term plan into question. And the Timbers could be faced with having to do some real thinking about the direction they're going.
All right, so like you said, you got to look at restructuring this team. Are there trades that can be made? Is there transfers that anybody has, looked into? Because I've also seen people, I'm assuming half jokingly, half serious, with, the hashtag Rescue Josie up there. But, I mean, the Timbers only have 1 DP spot left, so they'd have to make a decision between front line and back line. But is there something out there that you see or have heard that an improvement could be made to this team during the season?
Well, so the but the Timbers they only have one designated player spot used right now. They've got two left, so they could conceivably bring in a couple of high-profile players. But the thing about that is they would have to clear up significant space underneath the cap. Before the season started, at a little Q&A event that Gavin Wilkinson, Barrett Paulson, and Caleb Porter did for the fans, Wilkinson hinted that the team was using up pretty much all of their allocation money. So they're using up pretty much their entire salary cap space. So if they want to bring someone in, they have to ship some people out. And the Timbers have plenty of good young players that teams would pay a premium for. But like I was saying, that if they wanted to do that, they're really looking at sort of dismantling that core group of players that they brought in to be the future of this team. Now, they could get rid of, some guys who aren't quite as central to that. A great guy, and I hate to say it, but Frederick Piquion is definitely the first name that comes to mind as someone who makes an okay amount of money that they could, but who has not been really involved so far this year. There are people that they could waive, but they would still have to do some significant juggling to make any real big signings, is my belief.
And pardon my ignorance on the number of DPs. I mean, this is MLS. Transparency is not exactly at a premium here. And so now, wrapping this all together now, coming into this weekend against DC, did the Timbers finally get off schneid? Do they finally get a win against this United team? I mean, they dismantled Dallas this past weekend, and half of it was of Dallas's own accord, finishing with 9 players, but still, they are not last year's DC, as you mentioned.
I really think that they can get a win, but I thought that of way too many games this year so far. The Timbers, they're not a bad team. I believe that, and they're so strong and gelled one. Even through these struggles, they're still undefeated, or pardon me, at Providence Park, not gelled one anymore.
It's a fair mistake.
They're still undefeated here in Portland, and 9 games is a long time to go without a win. Even Toronto FC in 2012, they're the only team I can think of off the top of my head that managed to go 9 games without a win. So I don't think the Timbers will manage to equal that feat. I think that they will find a way to win this weekend.
Excellent, and I sure hope that is the case because, yes, like you mentioned, this long of a streak without a W is not only frustrating, but it's also mind-boggling for a team that was so dominant as they were last year, coming up just a few points short of a supporter shield. To go from that to this is really just a pain to sit through. It really is. So, Will, why don't you tell the people how they could follow your work and get in touch with you?
All of our Timbers and Thorns coverage can be found at stumptownfooty.com. You can follow Stumptown Footy at Stumptown Footy, or you can follow me, which will be a lot of updates from Timbers practice, starting in about half an hour here. As soon as we wrap this up, I'm going to head on over there at William Conwell on Twitter.
All right, great. And Will, thanks for joining us here, and hopefully we'll see you win on Saturday.
Yes, indeed.
All right, thank you very much, and thank you for listening to the latest episode of Diving for Penalties. Once again, you can follow the podcast on Twitter at yellow the number 4 dive, and that's at yellow the number 4 dive. And of course, you can follow me at Nick_Goulis. Thanks for listening to this episode of Diving for Penalties.